Okay, Channel 79, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order for Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. Thanks to everybody for coming this evening. I'd like to open it up first for public comment, but I guess there's no one here to provide public comment, so unless you had any comments. Okay. All right, so next up on the agenda is review and closeout of our reserve for capital non-recurring expenditures. Capital projects, we do this periodically. Jennifer.
Okay, on page 1 of that section, what we're looking at is to close out a total of $134,477. $90,119 would come from projects that are complete. $31,064 would come from some of those reserves that we identified to close, and $13,000 would come from another reserve. So I want to walk through those very quickly. On page 2, I do want to point out that the Board of Ed is turning back $75,000 on their homes replace ventilators design project. That's the bulk of what's coming back to us from projects that are being closed out. Their budget included complete design work, but they decided to get only a report because they now have the $300,000 appropriation for the HVAC design at homes. So they're turning back $75,000 on that.
What's the comment now informs 300,000 homes design budget? Is that good?
That was a different project that's going to redo their entire HVAC at homes.
Well, no, I know about that. I'm just wondering what the relevance of that comment was to this $75,000.
I think they included that comment because now that they only had to do the report piece from this project, because that report is going to tell them what they need to do for the $300,000.
I think there were three pieces. There was the $80,000 for sort of like a report, initial work, and then another $300,000 for the design and development, and then the actual project, which I think will come in the budget next year, is $4.7 million. So really, I think the whole project is $300,000 plus of design, $4.7 for the actual doing it, so $5 million total.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
They didn't spend as much of the 75, and that's being rolled by Jensen into 300.
Okay. Okay, Jennifer.
On page 3, about the very last one on page 3, clear short lane property. I didn't pull this out on a separate page. This is the only one we have that's been idle with no activity for 18 months. But Park and Rec has said that it was on hold, and they're negotiating with DAF and beginning to work on that again.
Okay.
There's only $2,500 that's unspent or encumbered anyway, so they'll be looking to finish that up. On page 5 and 6, these are the reserves that we had talked about closing. So the first set, they're ones that we had talked about closing, the departments are informed, everything's done, and we're turning back the $31,000 from that. This second set, all of these are delayed because of COVID. Either they're waiting on deliveries or SCBAs haven't been available, that sort of thing. So we're requesting that these be allowed to remain open because the purchases were planned, they're kind of in the works, but they are delayed due to COVID. And then the final one that's on page 6, Park and Rec is requesting to do one additional purchase out of their equipment reserve. There's a stand-up blower that was cut from their fiscal 21 budget, and they are asking if they can keep $15,000 in this account to purchase a blower. And then on page 7.
Excuse me, before we
Sure.
move on. Did we fund a new blower in the 22 fiscal budget? Because we didn't fund it last year?
No.
No? Do I have that wrong?
You funded it in 21, and then the RTM cut it,
Right.
and then Park and Rec.
I thought they put it back in the budget for 22, and we said yes.
I think you're right there. I remember that.
So I don't know why. So I think it's part of the, I don't know that they need it.
Okay. So they haven't been given the go-ahead to purchase that. The other thinking on it is that they had enough notice that these reserves were going to be closed, And if it were enough of a priority, they could have placed the order prior to the date that they were informed that it was gonna be closed. And if it's not already in the fiscal 22 budget, they can request it in the fiscal 23 budget.
I don't want them to not have the blower. So if it wasn't in the 22 budget, then I'm okay with this, but if it was, I think we're possibly double counting.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you guys wanna give me like 1 minute, I can run down the hall and grab the budget book.
Perfect. Stand-up blowers, that words you come across in daily life. It's just
And so
never-
we also lost the blower hanging this flood, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's a
That's
whole
not-
different.
Dan, you thought it was in the budget we just approved a few months
Yes.
ago?
Yeah.
The Parks and Rec capital budget for 22.
There was a $60,000 reserve in there that we cut.
That you don't see a stand-up blower.
I don't.
Okay.
Well, let's see what she says. We'll take what I'm at.
There's 5,000, I think, for small capital.
This is something high, it's not in the budget for us to just do.
I remember putting something back in that the RTM had taken out last year.
I think that was a fence.
They do not have a blower, they have a Toro Groundmaster 7200, which is a mower.
Mower blower.
All right.
Well, it rhymes, so you're,
That's
a
what
winner.
I was in the zip code.
It's
So
something from
why
bad.
would,
Comment retracted.
why would we do this? If it was cut out of the budget, I mean, I'm happy with the blower, don't get me wrong. But if it was cut out of the budget, why would we slide it back in this way?
So I think the RTM, when they made those cuts in the 21 budget, the ones that they did cut were ones that they thought funds could be found elsewhere. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't agree with the purchase. They just thought that we already had funds, such as an equipment replacement reserve, that could be utilized to make the purchase.
It's a pretty good answer.
And Jen, there was 5,000, right, of small capital replacement?
Yes.
Is that where the mower was?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so just generally on these capital reserves, so there's typically a request for something that's a small capital thing, right, that we'll approve for the departments and add to that account. And so kind of seeing this, we're just now starting the budget process this year. And I can't recall now what was budgeted or added to or provided for these expenses in the last budget. It just strikes me as odd that these are sort of accounts that are in continuous use, right? They're always doing small capital, and then we're closing these out unless there's been a change in strategy. We're not going to use these, and it's going to be funded in some other way.
So these, the small capital on this page, what we're doing is, these are prior year small capital accounts that have built up a balance. The 5,000 that we gave to the small capital departments, or gave to the departments for small capital in fiscal 22. On our ledger, we have separated them so that it's clear that it's $5,000 of small capital in fiscal 22 to be spent in fiscal 22. And so next year, if they only spend 4,500, you'll see a
clean that.
closeout of 500 of that.
But this is from fiscal 21, and these are all
And prior.
closeouts from that. Fine.
Yep,
Okay.
this does not include what they got in 22.
Fine, okay. This-
And
what
then I
else?
just wanted to say on the last page, Darien Fire Department didn't get back to me, and Public Works, Ed was busy with storm items, so he didn't have a chance to get back to me on his. I will bring those to you in October.
Okay. This makes sense to me. Anyone have any further questions?
Jen, I just had one more administrative question. I noticed some of these accounts actually have negatives.
Yep,
Do we actually need to transfer some of the surplus to those accounts and then take it out, or can you
no, we
just
just
do
do
that
the
in-
net amount, and
Okay.
so I'll do each one individually in zero amount, plus or minus.
Hey, Jen, one last thing for me. You said you were talking to Ed, I think. The Norotan and West intersection design, and then the Norotan and Ledge intersection design. So it looks like we spent a lot of money on the west one. The Ledge one either didn't start or is still going on? Could you just find
I-
out for me what's going on there?
I think there's an issue with right-of-way or something on that one that has delayed the project.
Okay.
So I think they're working, I think it's an issue with the state that they're working through. But I'll have more information for that.
Yeah, and the state is also gonna throw funds in for this project, if I
Right.
remember right? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Do we need a motion to approve these?
Yes.
All right, motion to approve the closeout of the RFCNRE accounts. Rob, second. Dan, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Terrific. Okay, we have a request for an appropriation from the Board of Education. Jennifer.
They are requesting an appropriation to cover the cost of 3 replacement vehicles that they lost in Storm Elsa. They are expecting insurance reimbursement, and actually Rich Rudel emailed me today. He said they got the insurance check. So they are expecting a reimbursement of insurance, but the total cost of the replacement is $147,862. So they are seeking an appropriation of that amount to cover the cost, and then the insurance reimbursement will be turned over to us.
Once those funds are received.
Right.
Okay. I talked to Dr. Adley about this today, and he said he confirms what you said about the insurance proceeds. And Jim, we spent some time on this, and the plan would be to take this out of Board of Finance contingency, correct?
Yeah, out of
Capital.
the capital reserve.
Yep. Does anyone have any questions about this? I mean, this is the first of some expenditures we're likely to face in terms of storm damage to town and Board of Education assets, so certainly understandable. What I like about this is that they've done a careful effort in trying to understand both what they have to replace, what the insurance is going to cover, and they've been responsible about that. So I think any of these future requests of this nature should have that same approach, and I'm confident they will have that. Any other comments, Jennifer, or questions? Dan, please.
I know we're gonna spend time later on storm damage, but is there a plan underway to protect our assets to the degree we can? Or to
Yeah.
safeguard them in future events?
Yeah, we should, I mean, obviously the Board of Education, Board of Selectmen will focus on that as their purview. I actually had the same question when you looked at the storm damage at the assets over at the Public Works Garage. At some point, you got to ask the question, well, are we supposed to park all this stuff where it was damaged, right? Because the back part of the Public Works Garage, I'm assuming where all that was flooded, sits down. In other words, what you see on the road here, they've got a whole bay, as you'll recall, when they redid all of that, that's down here, and that's where I think the flooding was. And so the question would be, how do people think about that, both parking as a general matter, and then when storms like this come up where there's the prospect of that, do we all hands on deck and that equipment's moved so it's not lost? I think that needs to be just part of this overall storm mindfulness, if you will, that is going to be built into a much larger effort, I'm sure, to think through what we need to do as a town, but that's a good point.
People put vehicles up like in the high school, right?
Yeah, they'll move them to other
Right.
places. So I know from what Public Works has been doing after Elsa with what they lost, they were trying to elevate what could be elevated, equipment that wasn't on wheels, they were trying to put up on trailers so that if there was a flood, they might be above it, and if the flood got too high, they could just pull it out on the trailer rather than having to move a whole piece of equipment. So they were working on that, and then when Ida came and they actually moved vehicles out, they moved them to higher ground above and beyond where Elsa had flooded to, and it just wasn't enough. So they had some additional damage.
Okay. All right, this seems reasonable in order to me. Does anyone else have any questions, comments?
Well, I'm curious as to why, are these all Chevrolets and Silverados, and do they have these very different prices?
It's their age.
That just struck me as a little odd. We buy 3 Chevrolet Silverados and they have very different prices.
No, I think they're different values.
No, I'm looking at the winning
The
bids.
bid prices, yeah.
Oh,
Maybe, are
Right.
we buying
Right.
used vehicles?
So in terms of the replacement, I know I spoke to Duke, and I think they talked about this a little bit in the meeting. I think one of them is a pickup truck. Another one is the one that's sort of outfitted with, you've seen like those boxes on the side
For
where
tools or
they
whatever.
store their equipment and so forth like that.
Yeah, those
They're
are
all set up to actually plow, but they all have a little bit of a specialty to it. I know they are like recycling their plows, but that was my question, why does one cost a little bit more? I think it's to do with the boxes they put on the side to carry,
That's right.
you know.
The 3500 is a bigger truck, like that's the first one.
Okay.
And then I think just one thing to point out here is that they, they're in that last sentence there. I think the bid was good until mid-October, which, when the RTM talked about this in terms of, what if this was a special appropriation rather than being appropriated out of a reserve? It was noted that if they get the order in this month, okay, they need to have the appropriation to do it, then they can get it in January. The later you put the order in, you kind of move back another month and so forth. So I think us appropriating this all from our capital reserve, and the RTM indicated they were happy whichever way we did it, whether we sent it to them to come out of the general fund or we took it out of our capital reserve, they would support it. This just gets them the truck sooner because they can order it in September.
Right. Okay, other questions? Motion to approve? Dan, second. Paul? All in favor? Okay. So we have some fiscal 21 transfers. Jennifer?
Okay, first one is 36,768 from contingency into hydrant charges. We should have 12 months of bills. In June 2021, because of the timing of when the bill came in, it was incorrectly charged to fiscal 21. Sorry, the June 2020 hydrant bill was charged to fiscal 21. It should have been charged back to fiscal 20, which resulted in us having 13 charges in the fiscal year, but this will get us back on track.
How much would it cost us to buy the hydrants?
We are not able to do that. It's the water service to the hydrants, and
So we got
it's based
hose.
on linear feet type thing.
Yes, we did get hosed, thank you. You're only getting partial credit because it's mildly lame, but okay. Fine.
Can't say, just a question on the fire hydrants. I mean, I know we pay it's like $500,000 a year, but doesn't the state set the actual rate that Aquarian can charge us per foot of line, per
Yeah,
fire
it's-
hydrant?
rates are set by utility commission.
Yeah. And I think all towns basically pay the same.
Yes,
Yeah, this is not something we can change. This is what it is.
correct.
Okay, motion to approve? Okay, Rob, second. Taylor, all in favor? Great. Okay.
All right,
So
next-
unemployment compensation.
Yep, the next one is 23,942, requesting a move from medical insurance where we had a surplus due to some vacancies that occurred to unemployment to cover COVID-related unemployment costs.
Jen, is this the town
Yes,
side? Okay.
yep.
Okay.
We actively disputed any of the claims?
I don't know. I know that historically, when towns have disputed them, they don't win
Is that handled by HR? or by
Yes.
your office? Okay.
by HR.
Yeah, when you add on COVID as a potential reason for that, no one gets denied for COVID, so it's practically impossible. You just need to let this ride. Okay, motion to approve? Dan, second. Rob? All in favor? Okay. Transfers out to other funds. Jennifer?
Requesting 12,647 from contingency to our transfer out to other funds, which is where we fund our contribution from the general fund to the capital fund. The budget for that contribution is based on the estimated revenues into the capital fund. The difference between those revenues and what's actually appropriated for projects is covered by the general fund. In fiscal year 21, the revenues fell short. We had budgeted interest income to be $100,000 because when we reduced the general fund, we missed the capital fund. We actually took in $9,855 on that. But that shortfall was offset because we sold a couple pieces of equipment, and we received a state grant for the central office project. So we only have a need for $12,647 additional contribution from the general fund.
So the 100,000 less the revenue for these sold assets leaves a
Yep.
balance of 12,647.
Yep.
Okay. Can you remind me what we budgeted for interest income this year? I hope it's not 100,000.
I think it's like 10,000.
So, okay. This seems straightforward. Any questions?
So why wasn't there a transfer for the proceeds of the aerial truck and the like to this account?
So when we sell an asset that was purchased out of the capital fund, we deposit that revenue directly into the capital fund. So we match up when we get the revenue, we match up to where it was spent. So we hadn't budgeted anything for the sale of assets within the capital fund. So all of these were in addition to what was already budgeted.
And how was the school construction progress made? How's that a revenue item?
It's a reimbursement for their central office roof project. So we appropriated the full amount of the project. They worked through the project, they submitted to the state for reimbursement. So it's like a grant.
Hey, Jen, do we know when that money came in for the ladder truck?
October-ish?
Last year?
Yeah, October of 20.
Okay. Other questions? Motion to approve? Jim, second. Dan, all in favor? Great. Okay, we've got a couple of police appropriations. Jennifer?
19,856, requesting to move from police patrol overtime to communications holiday pay. Holiday pay had been budgeted, it was buried in the full-time account, we didn't pick up on that, and it looked like there was a surplus in there, so it was transferred out to cover other accounts. But they can transfer within their department and cover that and make it whole.
Okay, and is the next transfer a similar problem or
No, it's same type of line item, but a different reason.
different problem? Okay, all right, so for this one for 19,856, any questions?
So does this, if we look at these together, do we think about sort of overall pay, holiday pay was 30,000 higher than we thought?
No, because we expected the dispatcher one, we budgeted for it. They included it in their full-time salary accidentally instead of in the holiday line, so it was in the budget, but then it got moved around.
Okay. Sorry.
Which is why we split these into two different transfer requests.
Got
And
it.
do we anticipate needing more money for overtime at some point, if we transfer out of there now?
This is fiscal 21, so it's all done.
Okay.
Motion to approve? Dan, second. Rob? All in favor? Okay, and then the next one?
So this is requesting to move again from patrol overtime, a total of $11,758 to detective patrol and professional standards holiday pay. In the police union contract, beginning with fiscal year 20, there was a change to how their holidays work. And now they can get paid out differently. When we developed the fiscal 21 budget, we only had about 6 months of history on how that new arrangement was gonna work, so the department had to estimate what they thought it was gonna be. They underestimated, so they need another $11,000 moved into the holiday accounts.
Got it. Questions? Motion to approve? Francis? Second. Rob? All in favor? Great. Okay, Parks and Rec?
Park and Rec, our program expense account. You appropriated an additional $250,000 back in the spring. They actually had programming that ran beyond that need, so they are able to find about 19,000 of it in their own budget, and they're seeking 18,396 from contingency to cover a deficit of 37,659. and that will make them whole. They, as with before, their program revenues always exceed their program expenses, so they took in more than $37,000 extra on the revenue side. Just to give you some ideas, on the opening day of registrations for spring and summer programs in fiscal '21, they took in $214,000. In fiscal '19, they took in $63,000 because there was so much more demand for programming.
That's great. The contingency for $18,396, that's a contingency for what? If they pulled that from some project that it was not used, or what?
No, that's from your Board of Finance contingency.
Oh,
account.
that's our contingency?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, questions on this? Motion to approve? Taylor, second, Jim, all in favor? Okay. Registrar of Voters.
They are requesting $4,602 from your contingency account to cover some part-time professional services and training services that are overdue to the fact that they had to run three unanticipated elections in the same budget.
Seems straightforward. I have to say, that as a general matter, I don't recall quite this many transfers in September from the prior fiscal year, but maybe we have had them.
September tends to be
Could
pretty
be
heavy.
pretty heavy. Okay.
Jim?
Questions?
Yeah, just a question, the 4,600, is that in addition to the admin transfers that were
Yes.
made?
Yep. Yeah, they were able to cover some of their overage through administrative transfers, but they could not cover these items.
I think, Jen, maybe could you just remind us, like, in terms of the admin transfers, is it up to 5,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Motion to approve? Rob, second. Jen, all in favor? Okay, great. Town clerk.
Town clerk is requesting to move $18,144 from their full-time salary into their seasonal, temporary, and their overtime. The town clerk's position was vacant for several months, so there's a surplus in the full-time account, and as a result of that, as well as election work, they hired seasonal and temporary and incurred overtime.
Straightforward, any questions? Motion to approve? Paul, second. Taylor? All in favor? Great. And the last one is insurance, risk management.
Right, final one is $11,366 that we're asking to move from workers' compensation to our umbrella policy account. Excess liability policy increased significantly because of the tightening of the market, and there's a positive balance in workers' comp because that rate was lower than anticipated.
Is the carrier Kerma?
Yes.
Comments, questions? Motion to approve? Jim, second. Dan? All in favor? Okay. Okay, so we're going to review the administrative transfers for 2021. Jennifer?
In 2021, we approved administratively 146 transfers for a total of $198,678. It's pretty consistent with prior years. The dollar amount's a little bit less, but a few more transfers this year. There were a couple that were done administratively that are above the $5,000 threshold because we are allowed per your approval to move from like account to like account within a department. So Public Works have $7,000 that they move between professional services accounts. And then one that Kate and I used our discretion to do as an administrative transfer was there was a reallocation of the position that's shared between the town administrator and human resources. You approved that reallocation in the fiscal '22 budget, but we reallocated the salary in fiscal '21. So that was about $17,000 moved between town administrator full-time and human resources full-time.
Yes, two questions from me. One of them is, don't know that there's a real answer to it, but I'll pose it, and that's whether, given the volume of accounts that looked like they were over budgeted, simply because funds were available to support other accounts, it just kind of raises a question to maybe take a careful look at budgeting next year and think about those things. Because if we'd had good budgeting, and this is not meant as a criticism, you could argue that, well, there's just no money to be had because all these other accounts have been budgeted so tightly that what we'd really need for all of these is an appropriation. But the fact is we've got 200,000 here that we didn't need in those other accounts. Not a gigantic amount of money in the scheme of things. It's not like the Board of Education thing that you did, Jim, where you went through and tested all those accounts. It was something like $6 million a year. Was that the number? That these were transfers or
I think it's 600,000.
600,000, not 6 million. Out of
Oh, sorry, the total transfers, yeah, they were significant depending on.
Yeah, because that, but that's an even bigger issue because it suggests that they're budgeting those funds, but they're in fact not needed for those purposes. And they get spent on other things. They're well within their right to do that. But it raises a question about sort of what were we budgeting initially for if we were not intending to spend the money on those items, or they were not really required expenditures, right? So, okay. My second question is, are the limits that we established, I think it was $5,000 for you, and some combination of you plus Kate up to 10,000, was that?
I am 500, Kate and I combined is 5,000.
Okay, you combine is 5,000, okay. Are those limits still working?
They are. I think
Okay.
they work fine, and I think it's, it keeps the departments in line a little bit because we say, yeah, we can only do up to 5,000, and then you gotta go before the Board of Finance, so sometimes they rethink some things.
Okay, well, let us know if we need to shrink the sandbox and, keep
No, I
getting
think
more.
it works well, and I do just wanna say on your first point, in some cases, the departments went over, they knew that they were going over budget for a planned expense, came in higher than expected, that's the type of thing. So they may have chosen not to do something else in order to free up funds. So it's not necessarily that
Fair.
the funds were fully available, they may have held back in some
Yep,
cases.
fair point. Any questions on administrative transfers? Okay, do we need a motion for this, or?
No,
No,
it's
these are all
information
done.
only.
Great. Okay, financial report.
Okay, the first item is just a year-end summary for fiscal '21. I apologize, I didn't put page numbers on this set. But overall, combined town and Board of Education budget, we have a $662,000 positive result of operations. And actually that is another 40,000 after we were able to book for taxes, there's a 60-day accrual to account for what comes in up to 60 days after the end of the fiscal year. So once Kathy closed out her books and we were able to book that, it was another 40,000, so about a $702,000 positive result. The next section on the summary just shows you where we had some significant variances. On the revenue side, tax collections at 1.2 million, town clerk revenue at 1.5 million. Both of those favorable, above budget. Building permits, 614,000 below budget, and then park and rec program fees, which we talked about on the expense side earlier, ended the year 256,000 above budget. On the expenditure side, looking at just the town, our largest surplus was in the police department. They had some vacancies, they had less than anticipated overtime. And then we had some other significant surpluses within the departments. And all of this was put together assuming that you had approved the transfers. So when we see a $67,000 surplus remaining in contingency, that's after everything that we just went through. And then for fund balance, we had special appropriations throughout the year, but then we added back in on the revenue side a surplus of 2.6 million, on the town expenditures a surplus of just under 1.3 million, and on the Board of Ed's expenditures a surplus of just under 1.4 million. So the projected fund balance for June 30th is about 26.2 million, which is 17.15% of the fiscal 22 budget, and is $7.9 million in excess of your 12% minimum.
Well, this is a gigantically helpful summary, as we were commenting before the meeting, so thank you. It's good to see this in a simple format like this that touches on all the things we worry about, which are variances versus budget, where are we on fund balance. It's terrific. Anybody have any questions on this particular page before we go on?
John, I have a question. On the PNR program fees, is it 256, is that net, is that revenues less expenses?
No, that's just on the revenue side. So they took in a total of $1 million. We originally budgeted 600, you appropriated it, or you bumped it up 250 back in the spring. They took in another 250 on top of that.
So it's in 304 on the prior page, is that a different number?
That was expenses, I think, right?
No, it said it netted, it said it brought in the 1.1, but netted 304.
Oh, yeah, so that's different. They brought in 1.1 minus what they spent on expenses. The net was 304.
And so the net.
This is not the net.
And that in terms of the profit, if you will, but their excess is 300. The 256,
It's just revenue.
It's
fees.
just the excess in the revenue.
yeah, but that's related to the revised revenue.
Yeah,
Right.
So
okay.
not the actual, not the original
Right.
budget.
And on program fees, we're going to handle that differently in the next budget. We're looking at setting up a special revenue fund that will be budgeted, but will be self-contained, and we won't have to go through this exercise, because there's just too much volatility in their programming. It's all depending on demand that they can't really predict.
Yeah. Okay, good. Other questions? Okay, keep going.
Year to date, page 1, looking at the town clerk revenue, they have a budget of 1.6 million, and they have taken in $630,000 through August. So the high volume of transactions that's driving their revenue continues. They've collected nearly 40% of their budget. Their 5-year average, which includes last year, which was astronomical, is only about 25%. So they are cruising along on that one. Everything else on the revenue side looks good. Tax collector is very comfortable with what she took in during the July collection period. She said it's on par with prior years, so we're in good shape there. On the expenditure side, there's really nothing of note. The departments are all tracking the way we would expect them to at this time of year.
Could you talk a little bit about, on the next page, just the grants? It looks like there's this tiered pilot, or the program's been replaced somehow. Can you go through that a bit?
Right, they're phasing out the pilot for the state-owned property where we were getting about $11,000. And the state's adopted budget includes this tiered pilot program, where they are payments in lieu of taxes for state-owned properties in different municipalities, but then they have a tiered approach based on certain characteristics of the municipality that each tier has a different reimbursement rate. So given our economics in Darien, we are in the tier that gets the lower reimbursement rates.
Well, but still, it looks like we're going from what we expected in the old pilot program of 10, 9, and 48, in the new tiered program to go to 66,000, is that right?
Yes, that is what was provided to us as the adopted state budget. When it comes in, I will believe it.
Really? Okay. Well, there you go.
Everything else is normal. It's nice to see that the town aid road is, hasn't been paid on time for the last couple of years, but we have already received our first installment.
That's great.
On page 5, the only thing that I want to update is middle of the top row.
Can I ask one quick
Sure.
question? Page 3.
Yep.
Emergency medical service reviewing CMed payments, like that?
CMed does dispatching, and we pay 2 invoices to them, and 1 went up significantly this year, so we're looking into that. It's a dispatching piece and then a regional communications piece. I forget what the other one is, but there's one that went up pretty significantly, more than we had expected, so we're looking into that.
But Jen, have we made all the payments? Because it says we've already expended more than we budgeted.
We have fully encumbered what we budgeted for paramedic services. That gets paid out quarterly, but we've fully encumbered the amount, so that's why it shows as a deficit. Page 5, in the middle, Board of Finance Capital Reserve. This shows it available of $130,000, but with the actions that you took earlier this evening, you added in $134,000 from the closeouts and then appropriated out $147,000 for the Board of Ed trucks, which leaves you a balance of $116,696.
And where does the insurance check go?
So what we will do when we receive that, it will be a revenue into the capital fund, but then we will have to come through the boards and the RTM to appropriate it back to your capital reserve.
Okay, so it does show up.
It will work its way back in, yep.
And yeah, I spoke to Jack, and he said he had already notified Seth that would probably be coming on the October
Yep.
RTM meeting to.
Yeah, we'll get the check from the Board of Ed, we'll know the exact amount. We didn't want to do it now in case, for whatever reason, the number differed from what they were expecting. Sewer
So,
and parking.
so I'm sorry, on the general fund contingency, so we had a number of changes for these fiscal 21 transfers. How does that affect our general fund contingency?
Those were fiscal 21, so that will leave you from the year-end fiscal 21 summary. You ended 21 with
With
a
the-
contingency balance of 67,000. They will have no impact on what's shown on this page, because this is 22.
Got it.
Sewer and parking are moving along nicely. The parking permits, the renewal period will begin in October, and they are back up to their full cost. They were prorated last year, but they are at full cost this year. So we'll start to see the permit revenue coming in. Pages 8, 9, and 10 are our active bonded projects. I know there was some discussion about Ox Ridge. We are drawing that down fairly quickly. We had total revenues between actual bond proceeds and bond premium of about $23.8 million. As of September 15th, we've spent $15.4 million, and I just received a signed invoice from O&G, which will be probably close to $2 million. I don't remember the exact amount. So we're drawing down about $2 million per month. That's our big one that's going on now. So we will need to go out and bond probably in January or February. If we draw all of that down before we actually go out to the market and issue the bonds, it's not a big deal like we normally do when we start a project. We'll front the cash from the general fund, and when we issue, we'll repay the general fund from the project. But in January and February, we'll pick up other projects that are either complete or have actual expenditures that we haven't issued against yet. So something like the high school tennis courts where the project's complete, we spent $525,000. We pull that in the issue. And the other big one that we'll pull into the issue would be the sewer infrastructure, what Ed has spent so far. But I'll bring that to you in the next couple of months, what our plan is. We'll talk about structure and all of that, and then we'll get ready to go in January or February.
Okay, terrific. Storm update.
So we have had 2 storms, I'm sure you are all well aware. Storm Elsa in July, we have the most information on that. At the time that I put this together, the departments were still pulling together their estimates from IDA. So Elsa will not be eligible for any FEMA reimbursement. We'll only be able to go through our insurance. At this time, the estimate is about $390,000 of damage, and I have a summary that splits it out by department and then between equipment, services, and materials over time, and then a very small amount for debris removal. You saw the Board of Ed has started working on their claim. They have the vehicles already taken care of. The town has submitted information to the insurance carrier as well for our claim. We just are not as far along as the Board of Education. But once we know the final reimbursement from the board, from the insurance carrier, we have a separate storm fund that was set up years ago where we aggregate all of the expenses. We will get in the insurance reimbursement and we'll come to you for any difference, any gap between those two as an appropriation.
Is the 147 that we just appropriated part of this 390?
Yeah, that's part of
It's
the
in-
Board
in
of Ed
in the-
column.
In the 169 or whatever, or the
Yep.
224 total, I guess. Okay.
And so for IDA, like I said, I don't have exact amounts, but the difference with IDA is that the state may request federal assistance. All of the damage assessment had to be into the state by September 16th. They'll compile that information and determine if they want to seek federal assistance.
Have we met that deadline?
Yes, yep, Mark was on that last week. So if they do get federal assistance, it will still go to insurance first. Our insurance carrier will be primary, and then FEMA would be kind of a secondary reimbursement, and FEMA reimburses at 75%. So we'll have to wait and see what we get with that. But likewise, these are being captured in our storm fund, specifically for identified as storm IDA, so we'll aggregate all of those expenses and come to you when we know the final numbers and what that gap is.
And this includes nothing that the town has spent on any private property or anything like this. These are only town assets, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Questions on storm costs or any of the other financial report topics?
The detail is really impressive. Thank you to everybody that pulled it together.
Yeah, those are all straight from the departments, what they were submitting to
Yep.
emergency management.
It is amazing, just the list of equipment,
Yeah.
the number of things that were damaged or had to be remediated or replaced. It's really something to see all this, and it's amazing. Okay. I think that was it on that. So approval of minutes. So these are minutes from the August 17th meeting. I believe we were all present. Has everyone had a chance to read through this? Any questions or edits? I have one. Let's see,
By the way, I assume we have a new plan to store this stuff somewhere else if we have another storm?
That's what
the baseline?
Public Works has been working on solutions to either raising things up, making them easier to pull out, finding other locations for them. But that is a big area of the garage that's, in square footage that's needed because of what we have, so they're trying to figure out the best way to proceed.
My only correction, the pages aren't numbered, but this was in the discussion of the 27 Crimmins Road house. I think they said that the property owners were there 6 to 8 years ago. Mark McEwen, I know they've been there 11 years, so I don't know if that's a worthwhile correction, but that's the only thing I saw. Did anyone else have any corrections or edits to the minutes? Okay, motion to approve the minutes as edited. Jim, second. Rob, all in favor?
I abstained because I wasn't there.
That's correct, you were not here. Sorry about that.
That's my mistake. Sorry. Oh, yeah, you're not. You're not. Never mind.
Okay.
Just can't vote.
Great. Special assignments, committee reports. Dan, upstairs.
Yes, the parking lot was cleared for the teachers coming back and the students coming back a week later, so, great amount of work to get that done. Some cost involved, but it did get done. There is an issue that has popped up with respect to, there's a delay in the receipt of insulated roofing. The insulation in the roofing includes a chemical that is on allocation. So it's pushing all the insulated roofing across the country back. Problem with that is that there's a domino effect because certain things can't be done without weather protection. So Kip and the team have worked through some alternatives and nothing's been decided yet. but they believe they can get this done at minimal extra cost by staging it in a modestly different manner that will likely result in meaningful overtime. So again, it's not decided yet, the numbers aren't finalized, but as far as I can tell, they've worked through a solution that has minimal impact on the school, the operation of the school, the opening of the academic wing and the construction of the assembly wing. But I would expect there to be some minimal cost increase associated with this development because things just can't get done until there's a roof overhead. So otherwise, everything else is moving along.
That's
nicely.
great. Okay. Any other questions for Dan? Other committee reports, audit?
I know I had a call with the auditors, had a call with myself and, I know staff here and staff at the Board of Ed. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I know, Jen, I think they were on site, was it last week or the week before?
Last week, yep.
Last week, and I think, I know in my discussion with the auditors, and Jen and I talked about it a little bit, I think there were a few items, and I think everything went well. I think there were a few things that he suggested that could be best practices that we could enhance, and in the process of talking with Jen, we'll put together an email, and so Rob and Taylor and I can discuss it, and I think formally present it to the board in the October meeting.
Okay.
But everything is on track. I think that it finished up in November.
Yep,
Which
that's
would-
the expectation.
Which would allow us to go to market in January.
Okay. Anything else on committee reports? Paul?
You wanted a pension report in October.
Yes.
And so
Yeah, we can talk about kind of content for that offline, but I think suffice it to say a general description would be an update.
that would include an actuarial.
Yeah, I think that would be good. We can talk about that and shape that up for the meeting in
I'm
October.
going to convince my neighbor Tony Yezzi to join me.
Tony on these matters is all-knowing and all-seeing. It would be great to have him here. I saw him the other night. I should have talked him into it, so it's great. Okay. All right, Chairman's report, 2 items. So one of them is that we teed up last time appointing someone to this ARPA committee that the first selectman has set up. Purpose of that is to get a good collective decision on what to do with the funds that have been received by the town from the federal government, which is in the, 6.2 million, I think is the amount that we've received, or will receive. We've received half of it, if I've got that right, Jennifer.
Yep.
So I know that the first selectman wants to convene that committee soon. I talked to her about that and kind of left it to us to decide, and I don't think we've had a full discussion about that. But maybe, if you had any comments, but maybe Frank or Dan, you guys would be interested in doing that. I know, Frank, you're going to be rolling off the Board of Finance soon, but if you had a hankering for some kind of post-Board of Finance public service, being involved in that committee would be pretty interesting, and it simply because it's a discrete project, like what do we do with this money? So, but if anybody else would like to volunteer, or you got other thoughts as to what you would like to do, I'm open for it. Thoughts, comments, raised hands, scurrying from the room?
I'll defer to Frank.
Francis, what do you think?
But if you'd like to
I
do
like
it,
putting
go
Frank
ahead.
under pressure on live television. Oh, great. See how he acquisites? I'm just such a strong arm kind of guy. Dan, what do you think? You want to do this as well?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, if there's room, I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. I
That
will.
I was talking,
Yeah.
I guess not.
All right. I will communicate to Jamie and copy you guys on that note, and we will get that set up. That's terrific. The only other comment I had was a lot of us had a chance to sit in the Board of Selectmen sessions last night about flooding. The first hour of that was to hear from citizens who'd been affected by this, and then the second hour was to provide what I'm sure is the first of many meetings to offer facts, perspectives, and information from people with a variety of expertise, from Mr. Craig Flaherty, who has a long family connection with water issues, obviously, but has himself served with distinction in a variety of flood projects and capacities, as well as other town staff like Ed Gentile and the like. So I thought it was an extremely informative session. From a Board of Finance perspective, I mean, our job is to talk about how and whether to pay for things and less about the policy matters associated with those decisions. I would say, as I've said publicly, we remain in an environment of historically low interest rates, and so to the extent there are investments to be made for something like this, just like we think about schools or anything else of substance, that we would certainly make funding available through bonding. And if you're going to have to bond something or spend money on it, now remains a good time to do that sort of thing. So certainly something this board should consider if those projects come up. There were a couple things that I'd highlight from the presentation that I think are important. One of them was this notion that it's not just Darien, right? And so I think it's a mistake to look at the Darien microcosm and say that we're going to solve these problems. And I'm talking about the long-term sort of solutions and the things we should pursue as the town, just with decisions we would make in Darien. Craig pointed out that a lot of the water is not coming from just here, it's coming from New York, it's coming from New Canaan. One of the commenters from the public last night mentioned that there was some work that Stanford had done with some culverts or something like that, that once that work was done, this person's property flooded and it never flooded before. So I think it's going to be very important that whatever we pay for, that we have an eye towards making this a geographically appropriate solution. So it's not just defined by town boundaries, but defined by the geography of this flooding, what is causing it and where it's coming from, and then take a look at that holistically such that our financial contribution might actually be to support a regional solution as opposed to something we would just do in Darien. I think that's important. But I certainly look forward to seeing what the Board of Selectmen propose on all this. I think it's an important topic we all take seriously in town. Certainly this board does as well. And again, I echo the first selectman's sentiments, which I think she articulated clearly. And that was real empathy on the part of that board, and I'd offer it from this board to folks who were affected by this. It was widespread. It was businesses and residences, and it was families with children and established families. So there was no demographic, no group, nobody that was not affected by this. I'm certainly mindful of that, and I think we should all be mindful of that as our fellow citizens wrestle with remediation and trying to get back to normal. Let's all make sure that we've got a productive and informed voice at the table when decisions like this are brought forward for consideration, so that when it comes time for our board to weigh in the unique way that we weigh in, that we can do so in a manner that's just as informed as the initial decision making itself. So that's all I had to say on that report, which I thought was excellent. I look forward to more. That's all I have for my report. Is there any other business or any other topics we need to cover this evening? Okay, I think we can have a motion to adjourn. Okay, Rob, second. Jim? All in favor? And 8:30, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.